Good evening and welcome to Silicon Valley Buzz, a TV show where we discuss happenings here, the most fertile spot on the planet for new ideas. I'm your host, Seth Shostak. And tonight, our guest, an eminent neurosurgeon from Stanford, who has written an intriguing book about how we can truly better our lives, not our physical state, but our mental state. And it's something he thinks we all can do. We can all become the person we really want to be. It's my pleasure to be speaking with Dr. James Doty.
It's wonderful to be here with you, Seth.
Terrific, Jim. Welcome to Silicon Valley Buzz. Let me get right into this because you've written a book called Into the Magic Shop. And this refers to a summer experience when you were only 12 years old. So where was this magic shop and why did you walk into it anyhow?
It was in Lancaster, California, the high desert. I was 12 and, if you will, lost. My father was an alcoholic. My mother had had a stroke and was an invalid, was chronically depressed, attempted suicide multiple times. We were on public assistance. Neither had gone to college, and that's not really the environment which would be predictive of success in the future. And I was reasonably intelligent, but I felt I had no out, or my life was at a dead end already. And I was
at age 12.
Well, I was becoming a juvenile delinquent because I had no possibility to go to college, I thought, or to see a positive future for myself.
Okay, so you walk into this magic shop. Were you doing magic? I mean, was that a hobby of yours?
Yes, I had been playing around with magic for a little bit, so it was a hobby. And in fact, what led me there was I had lost my plastic thumb, which was part of a trick, and I just happened to be riding my bicycle and rode up to a strip mall, and in the strip mall was a magic shop that I didn't know existed, and I walked in.
All right, but there was a woman in that shop, name of Ruth, from Ohio, right?
Right.
And she decided to teach you some magic, but a different kind of magic. Tell me about Ruth.
Well, I describe Ruth as an Earth Mother type, if you can imagine what that is, if you're a child of the 60s or aware of the 60s. And she had this incredibly radiant personality. And it turned out that she knew nothing about the magic in the magic shop. She was actually the owner's mother, and she just happened to be sitting there tending the store, if you will, while her son was running an errand.
Okay, but she takes you on. I mean, you know, I don't assume she did that for everybody who walked into this shop. There must have been something special about you.
Well, I would like to think there's something special about all of us, right? But I think she was a very intuitive person and an extraordinarily kind person. And she sensed something about me because she actually asked me some very direct, penetrating questions, which if you're a 12-year-old and somebody begins asking you questions about your family, your parents, your life, that's a little bit unusual. And certainly in today's world, if an adult woman was asking a 12-year-old questions, it might raise some eyebrows, especially in this case. Ruth said to me after about 15 or 20 minutes, she said, "I'm here for another 6 weeks, and if you show up every day, I'll teach you something that I think could change your life." And I wish I could tell you I had some insight or self-awareness, but the only reason I showed up is frankly because I had nothing else to do.
Okay. So she's going to teach you something, as you say. I mean, thinking of this in a modern setting, it might be sinister or something like that. But you came back every day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And she didn't teach you prestidigitation. She taught you something else. Tell me what she taught you.
Could you define that word? But you're right. What she did was for about an hour or two every day for 6 weeks, she taught me a type of mind training or mental training, or some people would use the term meditation. And in retrospect, clearly she had had some experience with Eastern philosophies, Buddhism, and also clearly understood what is commonly known as neuroplasticity, and understood the relationship of these types of practices and utilizing them in the context of repetition and intention, and the nature of that results in actually a change in how your brain is wired.
All right, well, a couple of things there. Neuroplasticity, I mean, that I know it sounds like silly putty in your skull or something. Tell me what that means.
Well, it means the ability actually to change how our brains are wired. And until probably 20 or 30 years ago, we felt, and I say we, neuroscientists or scientists, believed that the brain was immutable, that you had what you had, and if something happened to it, there was no possibility to improve or change or recover. And that has been completely debunked, and in fact there's a whole field that examines this area, and it's been shown that you can rewire your brain in many instances, and you can also, if you will, maximize your genetic potential for certain behaviors. As an example, if you look at an individual, he may not know it, but he may have incredible potential to be an athlete. But until he exercises those muscles and realizes that, that potential is never met. And that's the case for many of us in regard to brain function, whether this is happiness or the ability to be kind or compassionate. And I say those two things because those are really at the core of what defines our humanity and ultimately defines meaning.
All right, so you meet this woman. She takes an interest in you. She saw something in you. And you go back the next day and the day after that, and you keep doing this the whole summer, I think. Give me an idea of what she did with you. You know, the second day, what did she do? She just, tells you things, or does she have you do things? What is she doing?
Sure. Before I answer that, though, let me tell you that prior to walking into that magic shop, I tell people that I felt like a leaf being blown by an ill wind. I had no control over my life. If my father didn't show up, I had no ability to impact or change the situation. Or, as an example, if my mother attempted suicide, I had no clue what was going to happen to me from moment to moment, and which is terrifying, and is now something that is called adverse childhood experiences. When a child has multiple experiences like that, it's a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. And children getting out of that or having the tools necessary to overcome that is actually, until recently, not understood, and giving people tools. And in some ways, what Ruth gave me was these tools. And what she did with me initially was to make me understand that anxiety, tension, stress in our bodies is oftentimes manifested by your muscles being tight, and this often translates in the inability to concentrate or have attention or focus. So the first thing that she taught me was a technique, first of all, to sit down, relax, be calm, and then with intention, relax your muscles in a very specific sort of way, to say, relax your feet, relax your legs, and on until your whole body is relaxed and you're actually sitting with that. And then again, once you do that, then you're free in some ways to now be somewhat attentive. And for many people, having attention and focus is very difficult to do. But without attention and focus, it's almost impossible to accomplish tasks.
Okay, but you were a 12-year-old boy, right? You just got off your bike, you come into the shop, the next day she's telling you stuff like this, and I'm sure to a 12-year-old, most of that sounds like, gobbledygook, right? But she must have been suggesting to you that there was, in a way, big magic in this if you would only do what she was saying and practice what she was telling you to do.
Well, first of all, when you're ignored, when you are unhappy, when you feel you don't have possibilities, you're willing to try all sorts of things. And I think while I was only 12, the fact that an adult was paying attention, an adult in some ways understood my own pain and had insight into my situation and offered me a set of tools, if you will, that potentially would give me freedom, well, it was extraordinary.
Now, had you already developed an interest in medicine at this point, or were career choices just some sort of hazy object on the horizon of your life?
Well, I think they were, in fact, an object on the horizon, but as I indicate in the book, I actually had decided to become a doctor in the 4th grade after there was a professions day and a physician spoke, in fact, a pediatrician. And again, this was a person who showed interest. I'd asked some questions. He came up to me afterwards, and I was so impressed not only by what he said, and the importance of service to others, but also how he treated me like he took me seriously. And again, when you're a 12-year-old and in some ways ignored, that type of attention has a huge impact. And we know even today from a variety of studies that when a person takes an interest in someone, it can have a profound impact on the trajectory of their lives. And I'm a perfect example of that.
Okay, so this woman, Ruth, in the magic shop, she asked you what you wanted in life. And one thing you wanted was to become a doctor, right? Tell me some of the other things you wanted.
Well, some of them are not surprising for a 12-year-old. I wanted to have money. I wanted to, as you said, become a doctor. I wanted to have a gold Rolex, as a matter of fact, and a Porsche. And this is because at that age, and unfortunately some people even much older, feel that the acquisition of things somehow will give them a feeling of fulfillment or provide, if you will, nourishment in their lives. And while ultimately I did get that Rolex, in fact, I'm wearing it, and this was a goal of mine, and when I was in a position, I actually did buy that Porsche. But ultimately, many of the things that I thought I wanted really, until I reflected much later, really wasn't what I really wanted, or certainly not what I needed.
Yeah, okay. But nonetheless, it sounds to me like there was kind of an implicit suggestion, even a promise here from Ruth that, okay, these are the things you want. I think she gave you a little bit of a caveat. She said, you know, maybe these aren't the things you need, but you don't always get what you need, I guess. But she was teaching you the techniques of meditation, and with the suggestion that those would help you get to where you want to go.
Correct, absolutely. And there were 4 tricks, if you will, that Ruth taught me. So the first one, and in fact they almost have to come in stages, was this idea of relaxation and developing intention and focus. And in the manner in which she taught it to me, it was by the creation of a mantra which you repeated. So once you got to the state of relaxation, you focused on this mantra, and again, it gave you this ability to attend. But it could be also something like looking at a candle or visualizing something in your mind, but holding that. And once you learned how to do that and you gained some degree of attention and focus, the next part is what she termed taming the mind. And what many of us don't appreciate is that we oftentimes have a voice going on in our head which we don't realize doesn't represent us oftentimes.
All right, so you did this all summer? I mean, you went in there for months.
Yep.
And she taught you these 4 stages, which you outline in your book. You give the recipes, right? Here's how to do it. You can do this at home.
Exactly, and in fact, there's a website, intothemagicshop.com, which actually not only lists those, but I actually give a guided meditation on those 4, if you will, tricks that Ruth taught me.
Sort of a spoken lesson.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so is it fair to say that the meditation led to, if you will, the medication? I mean, that this is what made your career possible, or could it be the other way around, that you were destined to go into the medical field anyhow, become successful just on the basis of interest and talent and hard work, and that meditation was just something you look back on as something that sort of put your life in perspective? I mean, what was the driving force? Well,
I mean, you could argue that this was my destiny regardless of whether I met Ruth or not, but I don't believe that to be the case. As I told you prior to this, I was lost, and while I certainly was not dumb, again, if you do not have access, if you do not have funds, if you do not have mentors, if you don't have guidance, it's almost impossible to achieve. And again, I did not understand attention and focus, and these are critical parts of what it takes to accomplish tasks. And certainly becoming a doctor is a task. But the other part, which I was mentioning, was this taming the mind. And what I was saying is that many of us have a dialogue that goes on in our head, and we believe that dialogue is us. And it's oftentimes not one of affirmation, it's one of hypercriticality. And whenever I talk about this, almost everyone raises their hand and says that's true. And the thing is that once you say I can't, once you limit yourself, you surely cannot. And what she taught me was this reality, and I use the analogy of a radio station being played at a volume, which always is taking your attention away. And she taught me not to have an emotional response to those, the radio station or the DJ, if you will, because if there is negativity always putting into yourself or being put into yourself, you have a physiologic response to that. That physiologic response oftentimes is an engagement of your autonomic nervous system, and in this case that part, the sympathetic nervous system, which is associated with the flight or fight response, and that results in the release of stress hormones that are very deleterious to your health. So not only does it limit you in your potential, but it also has a negative effect on your health. So she taught me not only to not have that emotional response, but also to change the radio station to one of self-affirmation and self-compassion and kindness to myself, and recognizing that I am a human being, but it's okay to love myself, be kind to myself, and that changes everything. And in fact, the lessons that she taught me took me from a perception of having limited to no possibilities to having unlimited possibilities.
All right, well, I'm going to be badly behaved enough to follow up on that a little bit because, you know, by your own admission, you were kind of a middling student before you got to college, or even in college. You know, getting into med school requires a pretty high GPA. You didn't have that. But you were fairly tough on the admissions people, and you essentially said it's unacceptable for you not to accept me into medical school. So, and then afterward, this, you know, self-confidence, which was essential to getting your training, kind of worked against you because many of your colleagues didn't appreciate this.
Well, this is the challenge because having confidence and having a belief in who you are can be translated by some individuals as being egomaniacal or narcissistic. And certainly I understand that. But the other side of the coin is that if you meet other people who are confident, self-aware, and believe in their own abilities, they're not threatened by someone who's like that. And this is the challenge. I would not be here today unless I had a strong belief in my own abilities and a confidence in myself. But that doesn't necessarily translate into being an uncaring, self-serving narcissist, like one of our presidential candidates, as an example. I wish I was being funny, but I'm not. Okay. And there's a difference, and there's a subtle difference, although by appearances, to some people, they may seem similar.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, it sounds like if people thought you were arrogant or resented you, you knew that you were really good in surgery. You knew that they needed you, that you were an essential part of any surgical team doing neurosurgery, right? But of course that means so that the problem, in a sense, was with the colleagues. It was the other people, and they were just, you know, this was just, I don't know, jealousy or resentment that was actually their problem, not your problem. So how did you handle that? I mean, you have to deal with these people.
Sure. Well, first of all, you have to, and I'll tell you, just backtracking slightly, how you react with the world, and a lot of people don't appreciate this, dictates how the world reacts to you. And what I mean by that is that while the statements you made are true, I was not unkind, I was not self-serving, I made an effort to be inclusive, and there's a big difference between that and having almost every act that you do is only about you. Don't get me wrong, to succeed in life, you have to work for your own self-benefit, but there's a way to advance without stepping on other people. There's a way to advance without kissing up and kicking down. And some people take a long time to learn that, but every person knows people like that. And I would like to believe that I'm not that type of a person.
Now, your story is one of incredible success. It's really a very interesting story. At one point, you wake up in the morning and you check your value. You check your worth, your financial worth, and it's $75 million, whatever it is. And now you can buy the Rolex and the Porsche and all that stuff. But then the dot-com bust comes along, and suddenly your net worth was considerably less. I think it maybe was below zero, something like that.
It was about minus $3 million, if I recall.
Minus $3 million. Okay, this sounds like a really interesting Silicon Valley story. This is Silicon Valley buzz. So, tell me about what you did at that point. You had founded a company that made devices for doing surgery. I think it was radiation knives, that kind of thing. Maybe you can tell me what it is. But it was on the rocks. And here the dot-com bust had come along. What did you do?
Well, what happened was I actually had been fortunate in that I had had some successes with some startups during the dot-com period in the late 90s. And that success had translated in me buying a penthouse and driving a Ferrari and all the other things that you would associate with quote-unquote success. And it was interesting because during that period of time where I thought I had everything, because when you come from poverty, one of the things you seek is control. And as I was describing, I did not have control in my life. So in this situation, I suddenly lost everything and realized that this idea of control was a chimera. And I had made certain obligations to charity that I wanted to live up to, even though I had, quote unquote, lost everything. And so what I did was, the only asset I had left to live up to that obligation that I had felt I owed was to give stock away in this medical device company, which ultimately went, and I'd been the CEO, it ultimately went public for $1.3 billion. And I ended up giving tens and tens of millions of dollars away to charity. But that singular act of doing that put me in a position of self-reflection, going all the way back to when I was 12, and understanding the lessons that Ruth had taught me, and gave me this incredible insight that by giving that away, number one, it lifted this monkey that had been on my back, which was this striving for success and accumulating money and thinking that was going to make me happy. Because at the end of the day, I was not happy. And when I gave everything away, I got everything.
And that's interesting, because so that goes back to what Ruth was telling you, to follow your heart, right? I mean, you were in this situation where you could have gotten out of this obligation, right, to give away what was the last of your money, so to speak, and yet you opted not to do that.
Exactly. I chose not to. And actually, this aspect of opening your heart or following your heart by connecting with others and recognizing that by being of service to others is what ultimately gives us meaning, was worth every penny that I gave away. And it's actually allowed for even greater success in my life. All
right, but Ruth was saying, what you think you want is not always what's best. That's the way you write it. And clearly, that came back. But, there are going to be people who say, oh, yeah, well, that's easy for him to say because he's a neurosurgeon. He's not going to go hungry. You'll be able to earn money. You're always going to know where that next hamburger's coming from. And yet, you really do take this advice to heart. In fact, even though you're a neurosurgeon, I get the feeling that you feel that the more important organ is the heart, not the brain.
No, I think that's exactly true. And what people don't appreciate is that there's this immense amount of neural connections between the brain and the heart. And that, if you will, when you connect with others, when you serve others, what happens is that there is a change from what I was talking about early, where oftentimes your sympathetic nervous system is engaged, which oftentimes causes this sense of anxiety and fear and sense of threat, to your parasympathetic nervous system being engaged, which is called by some the rest and digest system, but it's also the system that when it's truly engaged, it results in a calmness, it results in a sense of connection, embracing others, nurturing others, and it's when that is engaged that your executive control system in your frontal area, works at its best in terms of decision making. It's when your creativity is at its best, or when you're in this what's oftentimes called the sense of flow, where everything is connecting. It lowers your blood pressure, it improves cardiac function, it boosts your immune system. So in fact, on the one hand, where you were mentioned earlier, this affects your brain. In fact, it does affect your body. And when you are able to use these practices to shift over to your parasympathetic nervous system, what happens is it has a profound, profound effect, not only on your mental state, but your physical state, and increases your longevity, actually.
Well, we're getting toward the end here, but Into the Magic Shop it's largely an autobiography cum self-help with meditation book. Did you have some goal in writing this? I mean, maybe it was your way of doing what Ruth had said, which is to pass it along, to become a teacher as well as a student.
Well, no, I think that's correct. Part of this, in the same vein, is I started a center at Stanford called the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, which actually the Dalai Lama is the founding benefactor. But I had given many lectures in that context related to that work, telling some of these stories. And ultimately, several people made it clear to me that these stories, or my story, was very inspirational, and it would have a benefit potentially on a lot of people. And the book is a New York Times bestseller. It's being translated into 21 languages, and I probably get 100 or 200 emails a week from people who've been profoundly affected by it, and it's an incredible blessing.
I think Ruth would be very, very proud. Okay, bottom line. Clearly, meditation is developing a code of behavior that's defined and bettered the life of you. The book is Into the Magic Shop, and I want to thank you, Dr. James Doty, for being here tonight. Also, want to thank our expert KMVT staff, producer Bobby Chastain, and our always hard-working series producer, Susan Hubbart. I'm Seth Shostak, suggesting that you tune in again next month for Silicon Valley Buzz.
Thank you, Seth. It's a joy to be with you.
Well,